Today, I have the pleasure of hosting David Long, the dedicated and passionate CEO of the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. David began his journey with the food bank as Chief Operating Officer in 2018 and was appointed as CEO just 9 months later. As a classically trained chef, David worked internationally in Switzerland, Great Britain, and Australia. He settled in Canada in 1996 and spent 10 years as the executive chef at the Terminal City Club, one of Canada's most distinguished private clubs located right here in Vancouver. Recognized as one of BC's 500 most influential business leaders in 2021 and 2022, David now leads the largest food bank in the province, assisting those in need from across Vancouver, Burnaby, New Westminster, and the North Shore. Initially established as a temporary solution to the hunger crisis in 1983, the food bank has since made a gigantic impact. Just to provide some perspective, in 2023, the Greater Vancouver Food Bank distributed 9 million pounds of food, supporting 28,000 individuals, registered nearly 10,000 new food bank clients, and provided 10 to 14 items to each of those clients every week. In David's own words, he's very proud to lead a business he wishes didn't exist. Isn't that true?
Very true.
In today's podcast, we will discuss food insecurity in Metro Vancouver and explore the pressing issues of food waste and food distribution. David, thanks for coming on Coastal Front today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
So David, it's interesting when I did that introduction, I talked about the hunger crisis of 1983. And of course, in 1983, our society was facing a period of very high inflation, higher than we are today.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the feeling of what the adult world felt like in 83 seems to have come back here in 2023. Do you have any sense of how it looks for the food bank today versus when it started, which was, I guess, now 30 years ago now?
40 years ago.
Or 40 years ago.
40th anniversary.
Yeah.
I think it's I think one of the biggest hurdles that we face now in 2023 is when you talk to somebody and you say, well, what do you do or where do you work? And you say, I work at the food bank. They have a vision, I think, of what it was like in 1983. And, they automatically assume you're in some church basement somewhere and you're handing out boxes of Kraft dinner.
Yes.
And then when they come for a tour of the facility and they're like, wow, you look like Costco.
Yes.
And I say, yeah, we look exactly like Costco, except we're free.
Yeah.
And, I got a 40,000 square foot warehouse, 9 million pounds of food, as you said, last year. And I wish we weren't in business, but as long as we are in business, we're going to do it as well as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we're going to spend some time talking about your new facilities that you've just gone into and to help give the listeners and viewers this perspective of how big your operation is. Because to me, it's a bit shocking that we have this much food insecurity in Canada and in Metro Vancouver. And also this chart, and I think we could just start right here because, inflation has been on the minds of many Canadians. It's mostly talked about with respect to, mortgages. People talk about the cost of borrowing on their homes. And, if you look at in the world I spend my day in the world of finance, I mean, the bank stocks are all down right now because there's some real concern over their balance sheet when it comes to bank solvency, when it comes to, mortgages and mortgage defaults, which we haven't seen yet. And I've been saying for better part of 2 years since post-COVID, the reason we're still okay right now on the whole with working Canadians is because they're still working, but their dollars are getting stretched further and further.
Yeah.
And so, but if we start to see unemployment go up and people lose their jobs, you can't stretch something that you don't have.
That's right.
What we have here is a graph for those who can't see this and they're listening to this. This is a year-over-year price increases from Canadian grocery stores. This is from Stats Canada. It was just published 2 weeks ago. It's the end of September. And it's amazing. Now, keep in mind, these numbers have rolled off from their highs only, 6 months ago. So these numbers are slightly lower than they were before. And I think it's also important when I read these out to know that these inflation numbers are where we were from a year ago, never mind where we were from 2 years ago.
Yep.
And those prices have not come down. Other vegetables, this is the highest one, other fresh vegetables is up just in the last 12 months, 18%. Fruit juices are up 13%. Other baked products are up 11%. There's a lot of things in the call it the 10% category, from pasta, cookies and crackers, fresh fruit, rice, You've got canned and other preserved fish up 10%, sugar and confectionery. I mean, it kind of spans the entire, fresh and frozen beef up 8%, fresh vegetables up 8%. And again, this is just what happened the last 12 months, never mind the increases that happened the 12 months previous to that. And having followed this quite closely, I would argue that a lot of these categories are probably on the whole in the last 2 years, upwards of 20 to 25% higher. Can you speak to how this is impacting people out there who are not just those on the lowest end of the economic spectrum, but even people maybe still working today?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly frightening. I mean, if you look at, I was in Save On Foods the other day and just got some groceries and literally just went in for a few things, and all of a sudden it's $120. And I'm going like, wow, if my kids are grown and moved out of the house, but I mean, for somebody with young children, 2 or 3 kids, it's the grocery bill is massive now, and unfortunately that's the thing that people where they can scrimp and save. You can't scrimp and save when you got to pay your mortgage, you got to pay your car, your insurance, all those what I term sort of the fixed costs. And so it's really frightening when you see food having gone up this much. What really angers me more than anything is the volume of food that I see that's wasted.
Is that right?
Like it's, on the top of the list here is other fresh vegetables. The average farmer leaves 10% of the crop in the field. And this is something that we are working on right now, because they filled the quota for, if they're selling, they're growing cauliflower for Costco or somebody, for example, or Loblaws. Once they filled their quota, there's about 10%. So if you think we have farmers that we purchase from, 600 acres on a farm, so 60 acres of cauliflower is being left in the field on average.
Is that right?
And are
some of these local farmers?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's all any farmer. This is what they're telling us. So we've come up with some pretty ingenious ideas on how to stop that happening. But in British Columbia alone, there's about $500 million of food is wasted every month. So that's $6 billion a year just in BC. It's $49 billion across Canada. And like I tell many people, the easiest numbers that I recite to put things into perspective, Canada produces enough food to feed 52 million people. There's only 40 million in the country, and 7 million go to bed hungry.
Wow.
That's your broken food system.
So it seems to me almost like we have more of a distribution system than we have a food production system.
We do. And I say that as well. I'm laughing because my staff will, when they hear this, they'll go, oh, well, here he goes again. There's no shortage of food. There's a distribution problem. And I keep saying this over and over again. And in fact, I went to Burnaby Board of Trade luncheon a few months ago, and David Eby was talking, and just that morning that announced $200 million, which is a phenomenal amount of money towards food security in BC. And $150 million of that was towards farmers to help them grow more food. And, 200 people having lunch, and I was the only one that put his head in his hands and was like, oh, for God's sake, really?
Right.
We don't need to grow more food. Part of the problem is everything has to look so perfect. So if
is that a big part of it? It's just the aesthetics of the food.
I got about 5 tons, about 11,000 pounds of avocados a few months ago because they were half a centimeter too small, and that was rejected by one of the big grocery chains.
So you have avocados coming. Obviously, they're not growing locally. So you've got avocados coming from, where do they typically come? Mexico or something like that?
Yeah, South America, Mexico, somewhere.
And so they come into the port of Vancouver.
Yep.
And then they're meant to go
to this grocery chain, and because they're half a centimeter too small, they get rejected, and so they're going to go to landfill. And I happen to get my hands on them. I'll tell you. The biggest.
I mean, avocados are quite expensive.
Well, they are. And
they're very healthy for you.
Imagine 5 tons in these beautiful green nets that you and I buy them. Yeah, half a cent. But so who put that policy together? Who sat somewhere in an office and said an avocado has to be this size to be that?
But is that a corporate decision by whoever the buyer was, or what? Like,
yeah, well, yeah, it is from that chain. But I mean, who allows that to happen?
Yeah,
like who in government is not paying attention to say, okay, so we have this massive food inflation. Food's really expensive.
Yeah.
And yet we're still allowing grocery chains to say, oh, that cabbage is too big. Oh, that, the avocado's too small. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it happens every single day. The biggest food waste that I've seen in my entire life happened about 3 months ago, and with the port strike in Vancouver here, and there were some mandarin oranges on the dock for, I guess, about a week or something, and they were refrigerated, and it was through Refeed Farms in Langley. We get a lot of these items that are being discarded because it's not waste food; it's surplus. And so I got a phone call from Stuart, who's the CEO, and it's his company. And he says, "I got some mandarin oranges if you want them." And I said, "Well, how many have you got?" And he said, "Well, how much can you take?" And I said, "Well, we ended up taking about 80,000 pounds, so nearly 40 tons of mandarin oranges."
Wow.
And that was all I could distribute.
Why was there such a surplus?
Because they've been sitting on the dock and they were being rejected, but there was absolutely nothing wrong with them because they sat there for a week. They were just like, "No, these can't be used." Okay, they're going to landfill. Guess how many tons there were in total? Or guess how many pounds there were in total?
Well, you took 80,000?
I took 80,000 pounds.
100,000?
500,000.
Wow.
Mandarin oranges. Discarded.
That's incredible.
And I could not distribute anymore. Like, I just literally, I shipped, I actually shipped.
So there's somewhat like being being a guy of commerce. Someone's eating that cost. I mean, is it the supplier of the mandarin oranges? Is it the coffee chain, or this is the grocery chains that don't buy it, and they're
no, it's probably the producer of those. And it's almost a seasonal thing. I can guarantee you that in next month, getting closer to Christmas, guarantee you there's going to be a surplus of mandarin oranges again, and it happens all the time. I got about a year ago. There were grapes arrived at the dock in Vancouver. I think they were California grapes, and then at the same time some other grapes, green grapes, arrived from Chile. And because the ones from California were a little bit more expensive than the ones from Chile, they were being rejected.
Wow.
There was nothing wrong with them. I got 20 tons of green grapes. Like, you can't even imagine what that looks like. And this happens all the time. So when I see this inflation, it makes me angry.
Yeah, I can see. Well, for sure would. Yeah. It's interesting, David. I've just sort of pondered everything we've talked about so far in our quick conversation here is all about fresh food.
Yep.
And I've always had the impression that, when you go, there's in schools and hockey teams do fundraising for food banks. I mean, I would never think to take grapes and throw them in a box that are going to sit in a hockey rink for a week before it goes off to the food bank. I always thought in terms of cans and boxes of things, non-perishables. But everything you've talked about to this point is perishable. So walk me through, is that dynamics changed from 10 years ago?
Very much so. So I've been with the food bank 5 years, and 5 years ago, 20% of what we would give out or distribute was fresh.
How much? Sorry,
20%.
20%. Okay.
And so over the last 5 years, my big goal has been to distribute more fresh, and our goal actually this year we set was to distribute 70% fresh. And we are
70%.
Yeah, and we've just finished the first quarter because our fiscal year starts July the 1st. And in the first quarter, we hit 67% fresh.
Wow.
And I say the same thing to people all the time. I mean, people that are having a tough time, they can afford craft dinner. They can afford the instant noodles. They go to the dollar store and they get the high sodium instant noodles. That's not what I want to distribute.
Right.
What I want to distribute is what they can afford, which is the fresh fruit and vegetables and the cheese and the milk and the dairy.
Right.
And the eggs. And that's what we're able to do. And I think from a donor perspective, people feel that we're really achieving something, so they want to donate to that story.
Yeah.
It just makes a better society. If you're feeding kids proper nutritional food, better brain development, they do better in schools. I've seen it firsthand in an after school program that they're getting better grades. There's less bullying, believe it or not. There's all sorts of things about, when you're feeding people properly.
Yeah, 100%. I remember reading about that in Omnivore's Dilemma and watching them on that documentary Food Inc. years ago.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons my wife and I started Fresh Plate, which is a breakfast program partner with the Vancouver School Board.
It's awesome.
And to help feed young minds, right?
Totally.
You can't go to school if you're unfed. You're not going to learn.
No, absolutely. Yeah. It's we have all these different, diabetes is rampant and all these other things. It's bad nutrition.
Yeah.
Bad health.
Yeah. A few months ago, Kieran, our producer, and Lawrence, our videographer, as well as Hannah and Erica from our team had an opportunity to spend time with you at your facility And was this the new one that you guys went to? The previous one? Yeah, and now you've got...
We're still there.
You're both?
I got both.
Okay. So you've got now a new facility that has... it's in Low Heat Highway, and I understand it's enormous.
It's about 16,000 square feet.
Okay, and your previous one that you're still at as well.
Our main warehouse is 40,000 square.
40,000.
Yeah.
That one you guys went to.
Yeah.
So you're obviously expanding. You've got a annual operating budget now of $30 million, and you've got 60 full-time staff. I'm actually just amazed at how big your business is. It's actually quite incredible. And it is kind of sad that it has to, because it is that big.
Totally is.
But maybe, can you speak to what's driving the growth of your, is it because you've been, maybe I'm going to ask you to take some credit here, but is it because of your ability to pivot this into needing to have more warehouse space because you're managing to capture more of that food distribution that otherwise would go to landfill? Is it more driven by the demand of young families and individuals who are struggling to make ends meet? What's driving this growth here?
It's a mixture of all those things. It absolutely is. When we moved into our main warehouse, which is on Winston Street in Burnaby, 3 or 4 years ago, I never thought that I would need more refrigeration because we increased from the previous location that was in Vancouver. We increased our refrigeration by 400%. And lo and behold, here we are, just like a few years later, and we need more refrigeration.
Yeah.
And
well, that makes sense.
Because there is so much food.
Yeah.
There is so much food out there. And what we're also doing...
And plus, if you're moving more 20% to nearly 70% fresh.
And so what we are doing is we're also supplying other food banks. And we're actually...
oh, really?
When the forest fires hit... we actually sent a lot of food up to Lake Country in the Okanagan, to the Lake Country Food Bank. Where there's a lady up there, Joy, who runs the Lake Country Food Bank. And I'm going to give a plug to Cisco here because they're a phenomenal company. I toured some of the executives of Cisco through, and they said that they wanted to help us move some food around the province if we were interested, because some of their trucks aren't full, and they could do that. And I got a phone call when the fires were particularly bad in Kelowna this year. I got a phone call from Joy on a Sunday morning saying, "Is there anything you can do to help us out here and see what we can do?" And the next morning, on the Monday morning at 6 o'clock, I had a 53-foot truck parked in my loading dock, and I actually went in on the Sunday to go through the inventory and see what we had, and we loaded that truck with about 50,000 pounds of food.
Wow!
Sent it up to Joy in Lake Country, and it was distributed to a lot of the people that had been evacuated from the fires and stuff. So,
wow, fantastic!
It's something that I want to do more of.
Yeah.
Because I believe, again, there's no shortage of food. There's a distribution problem. So, in the back of my mind, I would love to see facilities around this province where we can ship food to.
Sure.
Because there's so much food that can be distributed that's not being distributed.
Yeah.
And we're already doing that. As I said, Lake Country. We distribute up to Merritt on a regular basis. We're supplying Abbotsford on a regular basis. We're even supplying Nanaimo Loaves and Fishes on a regular basis.
Okay.
And so, there's a need to have more refrigeration, and we're extremely fortunate we can do it.
Yeah. Well, if I were to dumb down the concept of distribution of my limited knowledge, I would assume there basically be two key metrics. One would be what you just described, which is refrigerated storage facilities to keep all this fresh food preserved. And then second is getting it from your maybe central locations where you have a large amount of storage to these more remote, and when I say remote communities, not that remote, but like Abbotsford and Nanaimo, you still got to make its way across the ferries or down the highway with a truck. Does your Greater Vancouver Food Bank, do you actually have your own trucks that you deliver on as well, or?
We have about, probably about 8 different trucks. We got from a 3-ton, 5-ton, 10-ton trucks, all refrigerated. So it's really important to keep the cold chain.
Yeah.
So when we're picking up, we want to make sure that things are, at the right temperature, and then everybody has food safe.
Yeah.
In the organization to make sure that what we're distributing is good and nutritious. We have a fleet of vehicles and trucks, and that's what I also tell people as well. Is it's this is a business. We run it as a business, and when people donate money to buy food and to buy other things, the money also goes towards the fleet of trucks.
Yeah.
And it's all part of what we're trying to do to help move food around and to get food to people that need it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is fascinating. David, let's switch and talk a bit. So we've talked quite a bit about the distribution and the distribution issue that we have in our province. And I'm glad you brought up that point about David Eby's announcement of providing more food to farmers when that's not really where the problem is. And I think hopefully anybody listening to this will listen to that message and go, let's refocus around the fact that we just got to get the food preserved when it comes off the ships, as you've described in these circumstances, into the right hands, and maybe even supporting some of these smaller food banks and allowing you to maybe be the kind of architect behind that. But I do want to spend some time talking about food insecurity itself, and maybe for again people who may be potential donors to the Greater Vancouver Food Bank to understand who is your typical type of, and you call them clients, not customers, right? Clients.
Yep.
Who's your typical kind of client?
All walks of life. One of the frightening statistics that just came out from for Food Banks Canada, they just every year they produce a document called the Hunger Count, and the frightening statistic that we're seeing right now is 17% of the people using food banks in Canada are actually employed, working.
Wow.
And just can't make ends meet. And 17% of people are actually working, and we're seeing a lot of that. Seeing people coming, maybe a single parent with 2 kids, and once they've paid their rent for an apartment or wherever they're living, once they've they need a car or a vehicle to get to work, and they've paid all the other expenses, there's no money left to buy food, or it just doesn't go far enough. And so what we're trying to do is to we don't replace food completely for somebody for a week. We hopefully give somebody a supplement of food.
Oh, I see. Okay.
The average person eats 3 to 5 pounds of food a day. Okay. And so, we try and keep it about 3 or 4 days worth of food per person in the family. Yeah. And, it's tough times. And so we have a lot of senior citizens, probably, a third of the people we support are children, which is, that just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
But, you have people that are obviously lost a job, maybe they're on welfare, disabilities, different things going on in their lives. But when you see 17%, so nearly 1 in 5 people using a food bank in Canada, I'm quite sure it's going to hit 20%. You mentioned the mortgage issue. That is, I've already had those discussions with my board of directors. And in the next 2 years, I think we're going to see an even bigger increase of usage of the food bank.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all, because again, David, as I stated, what's been holding our society together, so to speak, is the fact that we have all-time low unemployment. I mean, you've got a declining economic growth rate, as well as rising prices. And the most scary economic scenario to be in is called stagflation. And you need those 2 criteria, and then you need a rise in unemployment. And if we start to see that and people start losing their jobs while prices continue to go higher, it's going to be a real problem. And it's interesting, your impact report highlighted the fact that you guys have seen a 42% increase in food spend.
Yep.
I mean, that's an incredible number.
So 5 years ago when I started, we spent about $1 million buying food. My budget this year is 8.5.
Wow.
It's and we have great buying power.
Yeah.
I was just telling Kieran before we started that, you mentioned bell peppers, and so you see the price of things, and, for fresh vegetables. And I was saying, we monitor everything we buy, and we have charts and tables and we have statistics, so we know exactly what's going on. And our buying power in the last quarter for bell peppers was 15 to 1. So I could get 15 times what you and I would be able to get in the grocery store for the same amount of money. And that's why we stopped doing, you made reference to that sort of people would collect canned food for a food bank. We actually stopped accepting public food drives because we don't want to have the canned or the outdated, because everybody does the same thing. I did it when my kids were young teenagers as well. Before I was in the food bank cupboard, you go through the cupboard, right?
Yeah, like what haven't I touched in years?
Well, a lot of that stuff is outdated.
Yeah.
And when I tell people that it used to, when we did public food drives, it used to be probably $30,000 a year it would cost the Greater Vancouver Food Bank to get rid of the outdated food or the food that wasn't good for human consumption. And so we got rid of that cost, and we went to what we do, a virtual food drive. So you can go on our website and do a virtual food drive.
Okay.
And, you know, you can actually customize it to your company, to your logo. You can challenge other companies to do the same thing. And that has been such a massive success for us that we're now sharing that platform or that technology with all the food banks in BC. So every food bank can get on this platform and do their own virtual food drives and get the money that they need to buy, you know, to purchase the fresh food. And one of the other things I want to try and do in the future is to actually have an online purchasing system so that all food banks in BC can have the buying power that I have.
Yeah.
And then we can help distribute that food as well.
I love your vision of this. This is really creative. It's very, very corporate-like. And I think, I know you, like when you first got this job, you know, there were some people who were critical of you saying, oh, they got this corporate guy coming in to run it.
True.
But I mean, here you are, you've been at this for 5 years.
Yeah.
And look at the growth you've had. Can we maybe talk for a minute about some of the support you've had, either through government support or how's the corporate community been for you? Have they been supportive?
Corporate is amazing. And you know, our landlord at Winston Street, and in fact, at the new location, is Ryan Beatty.
Ryan is one of our guests on our show.
And Ryan and Cindy have been phenomenal. And we were actually, I toured Ryan and Cindy actually through our Winston Street main warehouse. Oh my gosh, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago. And it was after the touring them through, Ryan said, got an idea. And he said, we should have a chat this afternoon. And the idea was to feature us as the charity of choice for BD Rocks in Stanley Park in August. And he actually double matched any donation that came from the people that were attending. We ended up, you know, $2 million.
Wow.
From BD Rocks. So Ryan and Cindy have been phenomenal supporters. Yeah. They really have.
Yeah.
They're great people.
Yeah. And they were the ones instrumental in getting you into this new location as well as your...
No, I was actually looking for the lease we had on a couple of other buildings was coming to an end. So I was actually actively looking for the last 18 months.
Uh-huh.
And we had a friend of mine in real estate, and we were kind of looking around trying to find the location that would suit, because, you know, you got to have a warehouse that has loading docks to unload trucks. You got to have somewhere where easy access for your clients to get to. So it's got to be, you know, public transit, you know, either a SkyTrain or bus and things like that. And I was looking through this building, and I just happened to ask the real estate agent. I said, "Who owns this building? Like, if we're interested in renting it or leasing it?" And he looked through his notes, and he says, "Oh, it's Ryan Beatty's building." I'm like, "Oh, right." So back to the office, pick up a phone, and you know, we did the deal. So I'm thrilled.
Oh,
really,
that's great, excellent. Any other supporters in the corporate world that you want to maybe speak to, or political world?
Yeah, I mean, the government has been great since the pandemic. I mean, before that, there wasn't a lot of attention on food security, but it seems to be front and center now. So, I mean, there's been a lot of initiatives from the government to try and tackle food security and to take care of things. I mean, I don't really want to start mentioning a lot of corporate groups because I'm gonna leave somebody out. It's gonna be
sure, fair enough.
Mention me on that, but you know, there's a lot of very, very generous people, a lot of generous companies. And not just financially, I mean, with their time as well. I mean, they donate volunteer hours. Amazon is incredible. I mean, they literally have 20 or 30 people at a time from Amazon.
Really?
Great volunteers.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. So if someone wanted to get involved with the Greater Vancouver Food Bank, I mean, they can obviously make a financial donation because you need money to be able to buy this food as you described. But if someone didn't have the money, but they had the time, what could they do?
Just go on the website. We have two individuals, two young ladies who run all of our volunteering. I think we're already fully booked for volunteers for November. I think we're almost half booked for spots for December. But it's an amazing experience. People really enjoy it. And I think when you're actually volunteering and you see these people in need and you realize they're pretty much exactly like you and I, you know, they're just going through a tough time for whatever reason. And when you're actually handing out, and this is the other thing about doing fresh food, if you're actually handing out quality food, you feel really good.
Sure.
If you're handing out boxes of craft dinner and bent cans of beans, like maybe not so great.
Yeah.
But when you're handing out avocados, for example, or you're handing out grapes, or you're handing out meat or eggs or whatever it might be that we have, because we create menus, you feel really good about doing it. And as a corporate group, we just get so many great comments. It's funny because when you thank a group or you send a note and you say thanks, or pick up a phone and you say thanks, and they're like, no, thank you. Like, thank you for letting us do that. It was so much fun. It was great. It was a great experience. So,
well, I can see that. I mean, it would make people feel good knowing that they're helping out those in need.
Yeah.
Speaking of those in need, Canada aims to bring in 1.5 million new permanent residents by 2025 under the Immigration Levels Plan. And obviously this nation's been built. You're an immigrant.
Yep.
My great-grandparents were immigrants to this country. And most of us either, are first or second, maybe even never, they were first to this country. So we have lots of immigrants still coming.
Yep.
How do you see that impacting your business? And do you get a lot of immigrants that are using you as clients of yours today?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We get a lot of people coming until they get on their feet, maybe, 6 months to a year, until they get themselves established. And obviously when the war in Ukraine, there's a lot of Ukrainian people coming over.
Yeah.
And I think it's fantastic for Canada to take people in. And, as you say, the country was built with people coming to the country. And that's one of the things I think that makes Canada so great is just this diversity that there is. But it's tough on the food banks.
Yeah.
And I see the same thing. There's 6 big food banks across Canada. And, the CEOs of all the different food banks, we all talk to each other. And we see the same thing, a lot of immigrants coming in. I think what we do need to do, I've sat on a bit of a panel discussion about this, is we need to recognize people's credentials from other countries. Believe it or not, at the Greater Vancouver Food Bank, I can tell you right now, I have doctors, literally had a rocket scientist from Brazil who was working at McDonald's here and trying to make ends meet for his family, but literally back in Brazil was a rocket scientist.
Wow.
And just his credentials weren't being recognized, or he has to go through a reschooling process.
Yeah.
So I think if the government is, if we're taking people in, we need to look at that. We need to,
fast track them onto a model.
Fast track people.
Yeah.
And you've got doctors.
You still have the minimum standards, but as
Absolutely.
long as they can meet those, or they get, the training needs to
fast track it.
Yeah. There's no point in putting them all through medical school or rocket science school to start.
Really look at those things, right?
Yeah.
And get them to be into the professions that they've, been working at.
Yeah.
I had a gentleman working at the food bank in my purchasing department who was a certified engineer.
Wow.
And it took him a couple of years to get recertified, and he actually just left us about 6 months ago. I was thrilled for him, right?
Yeah.
He could go on and do it to be in
use the skills he's built over the years. Yeah.
But it literally took him a number of years to get into that, back in that profession. So.
Yeah. With respect to these immigrants coming in, is there ways in which you can, I'm sure many of them maybe don't speak English very well, or maybe they even have, their sort of cuisine that they cook, the way in which they cook food might be different than what we're used to, some Canadians are used to. Are any of those factors in your food distribution, or how you get food for them?
No, not really. We use a phone service that we, if there is a language barrier or there's an issue, there's a phone service that's amazing, that you literally just phone this number and they will have somebody on the line within a minute that can translate. So that's become, what used to be an issue before is no longer an issue.
Yeah.
And then it's fascinating to hear how people might cook something slightly differently. And these conversations happen, people are getting so excited about something. You
mentioned you also have menus or restaurants.
Well, the food that we hang out, that handout to people, or the food that we supply to our clients, we literally create menus about a month in advance. So if we're going to give you, for example, if we're going to give you pasta and we're going to give you pasta sauce, and we're probably going to give you ground beef or something with it, or if we're going to give you ground beef, or see if we can't get taco shells to go with it, so you can actually make a meal, and we'll give you onions and other things to go into it.
Right.
So you can actually create a meal.
Yeah. Do you guys in-house do any kind of sort of initial food prep for your clients, as far as like packaging things, or is it all literally raw? For the fresh, I'm talking about for the
fresh. No, we don't really do any preparation. One thing I do want to do in the future, and one of the plans that I have, is to, because of the amount of food that's out there, especially in the Okanagan with all the fruits and things that are available, I want to start a dehydration plant.
Oh, sure.
And I want to start dehydrating fruits and vegetables, and actually supply that to daycares, like the YMCA. I think they have 3,500 kids a day in daycare. So they should be having really healthy snacks and different things like that. And if we can do that, I think that would be an exciting next step for the food bank.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to certain types of foods, you mentioned earlier, some poultry and milk-related items like yogurt, eggs, milk, cheese.
Yeah.
Are there any particular type of foods that the food bank is consistently kind of short of, or is harder to get than others?
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
Eggs are, eggs. We give out eggs. We give out a lot of eggs. I spend about $50,000 a month buying eggs because they're so versatile.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing really I can think of that there's a shortage of. If we have an opportunity to purchase something and get a good deal on something because of the size of the warehouse we have, we do it.
Yeah.
The most recent thing we did for people over the age of 65, we do a special monthly. They pick up food weekly,
Mm-hmm.
but then once a month we give them a special seniors pack, and there's sort of protein drinks in there and easily digestible foods,
Yeah.
and easy to eat foods. And so we got a really good deal from Costco on those protein drinks that you can buy, little cartons of,
Yeah.
25, 30 grams of protein in them, which is ideal for more senior people.
Yeah.
We got a great deal on those, I don't know, about a month ago. And, we bought and spent $70,000,
Okay.
saved about $60,000 or something.
Yeah.
So we take advantage of things like that.
Okay, that's good. The seniors are one group that I am concerned about because, look, of course, we're all touched by the idea of children going to school or waking up in the morning hungry. That's a heartbreaker. But I also often feel for the seniors out there because with this rising inflation, a lot of them are on fixed incomes.
That's right.
And unfortunately, a lot of those fixed incomes haven't kept up with inflation. I'm assuming you're seeing that at the food bank.
We see a lot of seniors. Probably 15%, I think, approximately is senior citizens, and a lot of them are on their own, and so, they live on their own. They're having a tough time purchasing or making the money, to get fresh food. So it's also an opportunity for them when they actually come to the food bank to kind of have an interaction with other people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we try and make that interaction as pleasant as possible. And I have an amazing team at the front line.
Yeah.
But yeah, more seniors, and it's a concern.
Yeah. Is there any sort of do people still feel like there's almost like a tag, a taboo for them to go to the food bank? Like what is the word I'm looking for? A stigma.
The stigma.
Yeah, stigma.
Yeah.
Is there still a perceived stigma of going to the food bank, or has that been broken down at all?
I think it's been broken down quite a bit, but I think there's obviously still people. They're very proud, I've heard people sort of say, I never thought I would ever have to come to a food bank. We actually had a single father with 2 kids who was working, had a job, and he just couldn't make ends meet, and his rent had just gone up 20% or something, or 25%, and he was in tears. He said, I never thought I would have to use a food bank, but he left with a smile.
Yeah.
We have a real friendly crew. We have great atmosphere. I got music playing, and I'm on purposely make it look, welcoming.
Yeah.
And and just the way we look, the logo, we rebranded the logo a couple of years ago, and just I want the look and the feel to be like, if your kids are hungry, just come and get some help. Come and get some food. There's no stigma. There's no shame.
Yeah.
Everybody goes through a rough time.
For sure.
Everybody.
Yeah. 100%.
And it's interesting. I was touring one of the most famous DJs, I think, in Vancouver. Works for one of the big rock stations, and it's a couple of years ago, touring him through Winston Street, and he got really emotional, and he said, I remember as a kid, I remember my mom using the food bank, and I was like, wow, you just never know.
Yeah.
You just never know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So no, there shouldn't be any stigma or shame.
So on that theme, then, what if someone was listening to this, or they knew someone who could use the benefits of the Greater Vancouver Food Bank? Like how does one go about getting food from there? Walk me through that.
You can go on the website, or you can phone. We have 2 wonderful receptionists who work. You can just literally phone up and come and see us. We just
I'm going to ask some really dumb questions here, but
no dumb questions.
Like, is there just the 2 locations? You got to go in person? Do you have to make an appointment ahead of time?
Make an appointment. Come and see us. If you really need food, you're stuck, just show up at one of our distribution centers. It's all on our website. The locations, the times. If you need food, come and see us. We'll look after you, and then we'll ask you to register.
Okay.
And then all we need is your name.
What's
and
involved in that?
Name and address, a couple of quick questions.
Yeah.
You'll actually get a card.
Okay.
And that you have like a food bank card, and we just scan that when you.
So there's no requirement to prove that someone doesn't have to prove they don't have to show their financial income or anything like that. Yeah.
We don't ask for proof of income. It's a pretty hot topic that a lot of people talk about, and some food banks do it, and for various reasons. But I always remember there was a lady who, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you say, okay, what's enough money or what's not enough money. Like, where do you,
who are we to judge, right?
Where do you draw that line?
Exactly.
And I always reflect back to, there was a lady who came with 2 young children, and she said, I don't qualify for the food bank. I know my household income is about $150,000 a year, and I know I don't qualify, but my husband's a chronic gambler, and I got no food for my kids.
Wow.
Right? So
yeah, how do you turn something like that away?
You can't, right?
Yeah.
So you can't put a financial barrier there to say, but we'll talk to somebody. And I even took some criticism for wanting to ask certain questions, but just handing somebody food every week is not a solution. So this lady, we give her food. She's got 2 hungry kids, and you know what? Here's some social services, or here's some services we can maybe get for your husband and try and help get you out of this situation that you find yourself in.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe the future of food banking is just, very polite conversations. And at this new location that we're moving into in Lougheed, I want to have wraparound services in the offices upstairs, where we have, immigration social services. We have tax clinics from CRA. We can educate people about doing things. I want to work with local universities about career planning and resume writing and getting people back on their feet.
Yeah.
So when you come to the food bank, you get not only food for your family, but you're going to get these other wraparound services there, and people facilitating and helping you to get back on your feet or to get established in the country, do these things. And
that's genius, David. I love that idea. I mean, if you think about it, someone coming to a food bank, especially if they're either gainfully employed or just part-time employed, they've maybe come from another country with a skill set. I mean, like, these people, probably the majority of them are not, like, they're not excited to come to the food bank. They probably want to be able to, I think most people want to be able to provide for themselves and their own families. Yep. And so if we can provide those people with some just basic services, like maybe even just a job bank,
and they're also, they're not aware of what services are out there for them, right?
Yeah,
they're not aware of.
Imagine being an immigrant to this country, like exactly. You said, the Ukrainian immigrant. You've come to this country, you maybe barely even speak English, and some Ukrainians, a lot of them speak great English, but it's a completely different culture to society. Yep. They got young kids. I mean, the amount of work involved to integrate into a new society.
Well, this really hit me, because I'll tell you a really cool story. This really kind of crystallized for me recently, probably in the last 6 months. We had a company come in, I think it was a lighting company or a refrigeration company, come in to volunteer, and they were giving food out to people, and the gentleman who owned the company was there, and he's originally from the Ukraine, and he heard a man talking who was there with his kids to get food, heard him talking Ukrainian, and he gave him a job.
Wow.
He said, "You're obviously here." And they started talking to each other and everything else. And my staff were telling me this story, and I'm like, "Oh my God! Imagine come to the food bank, get a job. Like, we need to do this. Like, we need to flush this out and think about this." I mean, that was just an amazing story.
Yeah.
This gentleman was fleeing the war with his kids, came to this country, trying to get on his feet, trying to get established, had to come to the food bank to get some help. Just so happened that the volunteer there was a gentleman who was originally from the Ukraine, was there volunteering with his company, and it was just like, gave him a job. I was like, oh my God, this is awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Right?
I want to finish with a couple of questions that are more contentious issues. One that's been one that's bothered me for years, which is around, you said at the beginning about the quota of these farmers providing food to a contract they have with maybe a major grocery store chain. So the first one is, if you have a view on, I like to call Canada the world of oligopolies. We've got 6 major banks that basically control the financial system. Mm-hmm. We've got basically now 2 insurance companies that run the entire insurance business in Canada. We've got 3 telcos that run the entire telecom communications industries. And we have, in the grocery store industry, we effectively have 4 grocery store chains that run the entire grocery system in Canada, maybe 5. Mm-hmm. That account for. I mean, all of these industries are complete oligopolies. Now, I don't think I can prove or provide evidence that there's price fixing, but we know that, for example, what was it, Canadian Bread, I think it was called, that was owned by Weston just a few years ago. They got slapped with the Competition Bureau for price fixing on bread.
Yeah.
And so do you have an opinion, first of all, on the consolidation of power, so to speak, within the grocery store industry, and if that's having an impact on food insecurity? I mean, of course, you've got people like Jagmeet Singh right now in the NDP, saying that CEOs of these major food cos are just making away like bandits. In fact, there's legislation being presented at the federal government right now, talking about putting some kind of cap on how much these food these grocery store chains can make. So do you have a view on this? And maybe it's not, I don't know if you're comfortable answering that question, but do you have a view on these major grocery store chains controlling the market?
I think the biggest problem for me is the policies that these grocery chains have about food. And I think there needs to be an education of the public about, because something doesn't look absolutely perfect, because that apple has a little tiny blemish on it, I think there needs to be something about the amount of food waste or rejection that goes on, or surplus of food. It's hard for me to comment about them if they have a monopoly on it or things like that. But ironically, and I had this conversation with my board of directors, food inflation, and you see these prices, and this chart that we have in front of us, and about how much, so fresh fruit and vegetables, 18% in the last year, it's gone up. Like, oh my God, how's the food bank going to be able to afford to buy? The ironic thing about it is I actually get more food because the public are buying less.
I see.
So if you think about it from that perspective, is the public's buying less, they're making less go further. So there's an even more surplus of food out there. So ironically, if the public's not buying it and they're having a tough time affording it, I'm actually getting more of that food that they're not buying, and then I'm giving it to them for free.
Right. Yeah, that's so bizarre.
It is bizarre. And this
broken system.
Totally broken system.
Yeah.
I say this over and over again. There's no shortage of food. There's a distribution problem.
Yeah.
So, by all means, raise your prices at the grocery chain level. I actually get more food because people aren't buying it.
Right. Wow.
They're going to come to me and get it for free.
Yeah. The second question I have is around the what I call Canada's dairy cartel. And I use that word fairly strongly. Canada has had, since just after World War II, and I know this from my own family history of one of my family members was a long-time third-generation dairy farmer until their family dairy farm here in the Fraser Valley got bought out after in the early 1950s, when we switched from sort of an open free market to controlled supply chain management market, where there's a supply management around dairy.
Yep.
And so it's well known in Canada that there are dairy farmers out there, and they on the whole make roughly about 20% greater income than any other kind of farmer in the country. Dairy farmers are the wealthiest. They have a complete control on the market. They have a very large lobbying group that lobbies both the conservative and liberal governments, parties, so that whoever's in government is going to be having a lot of power influenced on them.
Mm-hmm.
And we pour out a lot of milk. I mean, this is why a lot of Canadians go across the border daily to buy themselves eggs and cheese and milk, because we have these artificially high prices because we literally pour milk down the drain because this quota system. Do you have a view on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating, absolutely. I mean, on a positive side, what I will say is that all the milk and cheese and things that we have in Canada, it's all growth hormone free. That's the one benefit. So it's not regulated like that in the States.
Yeah.
And so that's.
I mean, that's their argument always. Is, well, we have no hormones. And but you still have a quota system. I mean, you can still have those regulations, but not require dairy farmers to meet a quota, and after that, any further production has to get.
It drives me crazy when I hear they're pouring milk away and things like that. And I mean, one of the things I never get a deal on is buying eggs.
Is that right?
Yeah, I just can't get a good deal on purchasing eggs. And as I say, I spend $50,000 a month.
Yeah. And the buying industry is also regulated and controlled as far as supply.
It needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
Why are we pouring milk away, and yet there's hungry kids in schools that have milk for their cereal or whatever it is, and things like that. So absolutely, it needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
the whole food system needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
And changed in a certain way. And I hope there's politicians that come along that actually want to do something about it. I really do.
Well, that's a good segue into my second to last question, which is about the politics of food insecurity and food distribution. If you wanted to send a message to Justin Trudeau or to David Eby, if it's more focused on our province, what message would you send to them today?
I would love to sit down and have a conversation with some. I think they need to have some new people around the table to talk about this. I think food banking's been around for 40 years. It's only got bigger and more demand, and I think we need to have some fresh voices around the table. I would love to sit down with them and have a conversation about building an infrastructure around this province. Why is it so difficult to get food? I'd love to get food up to the First Nations in the north of BC. In fact, in the north of Canada, right across the country.
Sure.
You think food's expensive here? Well, try get
astronomical.
To go buy a 4-liter jug of milk, and it's about $15.
Yeah.
I would love to have a conversation about what does the infrastructure look like. If you want to give some money towards something, let's build an infrastructure around the province, and let's look at moving this food around so everybody in this province has access to food. And the surplus of food that's out there, and just we haven't even touched, and I could talk about this for hours. The CO2 gases that come off rotting food in landfills, massive. It's more than any industry. It's more than any vehicle.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's get the food out of let's get the surplus food where it belongs.
Yeah.
To people that are hungry. So let's build the infrastructure. It's all it is logistics.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. It really isn't. It's if I can ship food up to Lake Country, and some of the people we were feeding up in Lake Country, they were the firefighters.
Wow, really?
So how's your disaster response program in British Columbia when the food bank is actually feeding the firefighters that's fighting the fires in Kelowna?
That's embarrassing for the government.
So we just need the infrastructure, and there's always going to be forest fires. When we had those floods a couple of years ago in Abbotsford, and I was actually one big construction company. I got a phone call. They had a helicopter. We were actually moving food by helicopter. It was really cool.
Wow.
But there's lots of great solutions, and throwing money at things. Let's make sure the money's going into the right areas and doing the right things. And I always say the same thing as well to my team. It's got to be sustainable.
Yeah.
I don't want to give an agency money because I got money from the government and then in a year's time cut it off.
Yeah.
Because there's big charities out there doing that.
Okay.
And I don't think it's right.
No.
I think you've got to be sustainable. So if somebody's going to become reliant on you, then you need to be in there for the long haul.
Yeah. Yeah. That was our focus with Fresh Plate. When we worked with the Vancouver School Board, why it took us a year and a half to launch it was I wanted to make sure it was a program that once we commit to, it doesn't end.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So on that note, it sounds like everything's going really well with the Vancouver Food Bank, right? You don't need anything. You got this all figured out. You've got growing, a growing volunteer base, but like you need something. You need probably, I would assume, I'm going to dumb this down, volunteer time and money.
That's it.
That's it? That's it?
Perfect.
Okay.
You nailed it.
Okay. So walk us through, we talked a little bit more earlier about how people can volunteer, but talk about donations.
Again, donations online on the website. We have a great online website and easy donations. Become a monthly donor. That is, that's kind of the lifeline of a charity is a monthly donor.
Yeah.
I'm a monthly donor to the food bank. I work there, but I donate every month, $50, and every little bit helps. It really, really does, and it goes to running what is a big business and running it effectively and running it. We're not. We got a 5-star A+ rating from Charity Intelligence. In fact, we got in the top 100 charities of Canada this year.
Did you really?
Because of how we, you can see our impact report. You've got one in front of you.
Yeah, right.
Our impact report just came out for the previous year. It's on our website, and we're completely transparent. The financials are there. You can ask me any question you want. I'll answer it about how we run the operation. We're a living wage employer. My board of directors have been fantastic about how we run this organization, and I said to them at one board meeting a few years ago. I said, I have such dedicated staff. I've got one gentleman who I think 15 years with a food bank driving a forklift in the warehouse. And I said, I don't want him to work his whole life in this industry and then have to use the food bank.
Yeah.
So we need to pay
Well said.
wages.
Yeah.
And we need to support the team that we have so we can do the work that we do.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of how we run it and how we operate. And the impact report has just come out for the last year. And, you know, it's 40 years. I wish it wasn't 40 years.
Yeah.
But it's either a financial donation online or come volunteer your time.
Yeah.
Or phone me up. Like, come and, you know, you can see me on the website there. You can find me.
Yeah.
Phone reception. Tell me you want to have a tour of the website or a tour of the facility.
Yeah.
And we'll walk you through it. And you can actually come and see it.
Yeah,
So
you did that for our team. And just to be clear, because a lot of our listeners and viewers are corporate people in Metro Vancouver. They employ a lot of people. You do have sort of corporate groups that come and volunteer en masse, right?
Huge.
Yeah.
I got I think it's about 2,000 or 3,000 different corporate groups.
Yeah.
Volunteer their time, and they literally have a good time. And it just, you know, I talk to volunteers all the time. Like, oh my God, it's awesome. It's the best experience. It's great. You come down and have some fun, and we do have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And we can, you know, we kind of look after our volunteers, and you know, we also look after our donors, and you know, we do a regular thankathon.
Yeah.
And the whole team, my board of directors, everybody on staff will, you know, phone 20 or 30 different donors and just say thank you. And we always get the same thing. No, thank you. And I'm really glad I can help.
Yeah.
So,
fantastic.
It's awesome.
Well, David Long, CEO of Greater Vancouver Food Bank. It's amazing to see what you've done. I know you're celebrating your 40th year this year, but you've been there for the last 5 and you've really moved the needle on this thing. It's unfortunate this industry and this business exists. We both agree to that.
Yeah.
But since we know it does, it's nice to have a guy like you at the top of the group, leading it and growing it the way you have, going from 20% perishable foods to a target of 70, and you hit 67. I think you said in your last quarter. It's an amazing statistic. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Well, thank you very much, dude.
And carry on, man. This is great.
That's awesome.
Keep it going.
Thank you very much,
David Long.